Cheers and welcome back, everyone, to Coffee and UFOs. I'm Alan B. Smith, your grateful host, and tonight I have a returning guest, Debra Jordan-Kauble. I'm really excited to bring Debra on because we've been focusing a lot on Coffee and UFOs, on the debunker topic, and I really wanted to get back to core ufology and get down to a case that we can start from the ground up and really discuss and analyze. So fortunately, Deb has decided to come back on. I don't know why, but she did. So thank you so much, Deb. Welcome back to Coffee and UFOs. How are you?
Thanks for asking me to come back. I always enjoy your shows, and I'm always glad to hang out and chat with you.
Yeah, me too. It's always a pleasure. Whether it's chatting, texting, emailing, like you're good vibes all around, and I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you.
And I know you've been going through a lot. So considering that, the stuff that you have to go through in your personal life and all that jazz, like your ability to maintain, I don't know, a steady optimism or just like a well-tempered attitude towards all of it. It's really inspiring. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
I
So yeah, we
do
do
what I
want to
gotta
talk.
do.
What's that?
I do what I got to do.
Hey, you sound like a New Yorker. You gotta do what you gotta do over here. I'm from New Jersey, but we got a lot of transplants in Jersey. But anyway, so I want to talk about your experience from the ground up. So can you take us back in time, before you met Budd Hopkins, who wrote about you in his book Intruders, and tell us where your story and your relationship with UFOs and alleged extraterrestrials began?
Well, it goes way back. My first memory is of going on a trip with my sister, and I was probably 6 years old at the time. She was not too far out of just getting her driver's license and had gone on a trip up to Detroit to visit a friend. This friend, her grandparents were our neighbors on Michigan Street. And whenever this girl used to come down and stay with her grandparents, she played with my sister Kathie, and they got to be friends. And she had a little sister that I used to play with. It was more my age. So when my sister drove up there, she took me with her so that I could play with my little friend. It was just like an overnight, day trip, couple 3-hour drive. I think it was. It wasn't that far. So anyway, I went up there with her, and I ended up missing for the whole day. I was gone, and police were out looking for me and everything. And it was my sister who found me and brought me back. And I had vague memories and strange dreams about that time for a while. But, at 6, it eventually faded. And then I started to read that we remembered stuff again once the investigation with Intruders started, and we started actively trying to, remember things from the past. And I got more detail of it. And then my sister was able to direct Budd to actually make contact with the people who we stayed with. So that kind of confirmed some of the things that I had remembered. Excuse me. And then my sister had some weird incident with a UFO in 1965. And, she talked about it in the family, and I grew up hearing it. She was taking Mom to bingo one night and dropped her off at the bingo game. And on the way home, she felt this compulsion to pull into this parking lot of this church. And so she did, and drove around to the back of the church, behind the church, and parked her car. When she looked up, there was this big silver disc right above her car in the sky. And I believe she said it had colored lights swirling around it underneath. But I'm not for sure. I can't remember exactly, because that's been 50 years ago. Yeah. But I do remember her saying that this disc picked her whole car up with her in it. And then her next conscious memory is waking up in the car in the parking lot, but it's now dark. and it was daylight when she first saw the disc. And also, it was now time to pick Mom up. So several hours had passed, and she hurried up and went and picked our mom up. And I remember Mom talking about how animated and agitated she was all the way home, telling Mom about what she'd seen. We had a lot of paranormal activity in the house. We didn't call it paranormal activity at the time. We just called it ghosts or weird stuff, you know. And so, I mean, it's been a part of my strangeness has been kind of a part of my life since as far back as I can remember.
And this was 65 when she saw the silver disc?
I believe it was in 65, and it was in Indianapolis when she saw this. And I think 65 was a year for a lot of sightings in the Midwest, I believe.
Right.
So.
And what about your experience when it got personal with you?
When it got personal with me,
Yeah.
I was a teenager. I remember being with a couple of friends, and we were doing typical teenage stuff. We'd been at the skating rink earlier that night. We were old enough that my friend was driving, and we ended up spying on her boyfriend. After he left the skating rink first and was supposed to go home. So we ended up.
Did you say spying on the boyfriend?
We were spying on her boyfriend. Yes, that's what we did.
Right.
Low-key stalking him. I could have cared less, but she wanted to know that if he really went home like he said he was. And he lived out in the country, way out on the far east side of Indianapolis, which at that time was all cornfields and there wasn't anything there.
Is that near like the Copley area? Is that the same?
It's actually on the opposite side of town where that happened.
Gotcha.
But as Indianapolis is a pretty big city, so it's late, it's after midnight, 1 a.m, and we're out driving in the country, seeing if we can find this boy's car in the right place, which should be in his driveway, right? And I first noticed this light in the sky, and I pointed up to it. I watched it for a minute because I thought it was acting kind of weird, bouncing around a little weird. And I at one point I made a comment to my friends. I pointed and I said, look, there's a UFO. And I kind of giggled a little bit because I didn't really think it was a UFO at that point. And I kept watching it. The odd part was when I said that, the girl in the backseat, who I didn't even know, she was actually friends with my other friend. She flipped out. She's like, oh my God, don't say that. She got really scared and started asking to go home, and she got down, behind the two seats in the back seat. And I kind of chuckled at her a little bit. I looked at my girlfriend who was driving. And then the next thing I remember I don't see the other girls. I feel like I'm in the car, but everything is black. Like I'm surrounded with this black smoke. And then it feels like something is pulling me out of the car very forcefully and gets a hold of my legs at some point and is pulling me out of the car. And then my next memory after that is driving down the street, look at my girlfriend who's driving, and we realize quite a bit of time has passed, so much so we had to hurry up and get home because she's like, oh my God, my parents are going to be up pretty soon for work. And they're going to flip out if they find out we were out all night. So we went back to her. We dropped her friend off and went back to her house.
Did you guys discuss in the car, like what happened to the time, or?
No, we didn't. We just thought that's weird. And I do remember her making some comment like time flies when you're having fun or something like that. And her and I actually climbed in her bedroom window, which we had climbed in and out of it before, so it wasn't a problem, just so that we wouldn't meet her parents in the living room as they were getting up to get coffee and go to work. So they would.
Well, obviously you're professional stalkers, so you know how to climb in and out of windows.
Professional stalkers and professional window climbers, teenage girls. You know what I'm saying? Back in the 70s. But anyway, it was years later. I started dreaming. I started having dreams about that night, scary dreams.
Yeah.
And I've always called them dreams. I probably always will, whether were actually or not. I'm not 100% sure, but they don't feel like they were. And when Budd came to begin the investigation in after 83, one of the questions he asked me was, well, were there any other weird things that happened to you? And I was like, oh yeah, I remembered this incident, and I told him about it. And he said, well, is there any way maybe we could talk to these girls? And I said, I don't know about the one in the backseat because I never really knew her, but I know the other one. I hadn't talked to her in years because after that we kind of drifted apart. But my sister was friends with her brother. They're old. He was also a bit older than her.
Mhm.
Like my sister was older than me. So we had my sister get her contact information, and I called her, had a nice chat, and asked her if I could bring Budd over to meet her and talk about that night. And she's like, sure. So I brought him over. It'd been years, maybe 10 years or more since I'd seen her. It'd been a long time. So that was nice to see her. And when we went in there, he says, so can you tell me about that night and with the light? And the first thing that struck me was she said, you mean the light in the sky or the light on the ground? And I looked at her kind of weird because I never mentioned to Budd about there being a light on the ground because I didn't even remember that part.
Mhm.
And Budd looked at me and he said, you remember a light on the ground? And she's like, yeah. And she proceeds to tell him that she got out of the car and pulled over and got out of the car to look at this light that was in the sky and had landed like in the grass on the side of the road,
Mhm.
in the field next to us. I don't remember any of that. And I
You
can't remember.
So did she step out of the car before that you saw that black smoke? Is that
I have no idea.
okay?
I don't remember her getting out of the car, and I can't remember what she said. I'd have to go back and actually read the Intruders to get the story completely right because it's been so long. All I remember for sure is that she remembered me, pointing out the light in the sky, but she remembered it coming down and her pulling over to look at it. And that blew my mind, and it really gave me the creeps because I'm trying to think in my mind as the years passed. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Trying to just live with it. And then she comes off with this and totally wrecks all that. And so that happened in like the fall and of my 17th year. And then I was married in April of the following year. Yeah. Yeah. Well, see, I found out I was pregnant in February,
Mhm.
which I wasn't married yet, and this was a different time. So,
Sure.
we moved I was engaged. We were going to get married in June. We just moved it up to April, and I got married in April.
Mhm.
And so then that's the pregnancy that just disappeared from nowhere. But as a young married woman, it was right around that same time. I remember my husband and I were in bed asleep, and I was awakened by these two guys in my room at the foot of my bed. And I call them guys. They were the little guys with the big heads and the big eyes.
Was this while you were still pregnant, or?
No, I don't think I was pregnant at that point.
Okay.
I think I had already, that had already, no, because no, I couldn't have been because I wasn't married. I wasn't pregnant. March, I think, is when I found out I was no longer pregnant, and we got married in April. So no,
Okay.
but I remember when I first saw them in the bedroom, they startled me and scared me, and I remember the terror and the feeling and thinking, "Don't touch me, don't come any closer to me." The panic welled up in me, and I remember kind of scooting up in bed to get away from them. And as the minute I had that thought and that panic swept over me, then it was gone. It just was wiped away. And they came closer to me. And I noticed that one of them was holding a box, like a shoebox size thing or a small box. It was black and had a red light on it, or, maybe a hole in it with a red light in it. But I became fascinated with it. And I asked him, could I have it? At some point it floated from him to me and was like on my lap as I sat in the bed. And I remember thinking to myself or thinking to him or saying to him, can I have this? What is it? He said, no, you can't have it. But when you see it again, you'll remember what it is and how to use it. And then he took it back. Then they just backed away from the bed and they just kind of fizzled out. They just kind of shimmered and went away. They just were gone like that. And I tried to wake my husband up.
Mm-hmm.
He had his back to me with his face to the wall, and I'm shaking him, hollering at him to get up, and he was not waking up. And so I laid down in the bed and I went to sleep, which makes absolutely no sense at all. Sounds crazy, but that's what I did. I went right to sleep, but I woke up in the morning and remembered everything, just like it just happened. And I was telling him about it, and he was kind of laughing at me like, what is wrong with you? What did you eat for dinner? You don't eat that anymore.
Right.
Giving you nightmares. So I called my mom and I told her about it that very next morning. And I was very adamant that it was not a dream. I was awake.
Okay.
I was awake when I saw these in my room. And I mean, what are you going to do? Or I told my mom, I told my husband, and you just got to put it away. After that happened, I noticed the house we lived in an old attic in the middle of downtown Indianapolis in an old house. And we lived in an attic apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And the houses were so close together that I swear you could open the kitchen window and stick your hand out and touch the kitchen window of the house next to me, but I think the house next to us was vacant. It was empty at the time.
Okay.
So there was this great big empty dark window and then my window. And after that happened for a while, I really was out when I was in the kitchen at night because I felt like someone was in the other house looking in, watching me. I couldn't shake that feeling for the longest time. So
like someone was there that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, because the house was vacant. There wasn't anybody living in it. So nobody should have been in there unless there was, like squatters or homeless, people that go in vacant houses to use drugs and stuff. I don't recall consciously ever seeing anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember one time it was dark outside and my kitchen light was on. And I remember kind of glancing over at the window and I think I saw myself in the, myself in the window reflected back on me. Okay. And it scared the hell out of me.
Yeah. After your experiences. Yeah.
So
you say that it's very clear that you saw these in your conscious state, an awakened state.
Absolutely.
Have you ever been confused between a hypnagogic, a dream, and an awake state?
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've seen things and I remember things, but I've called them dreams because I didn't know what else to call them. And that was the only thing that felt comfortable to me to call them because they just couldn't be real. You know what I mean?
Is that a way to talk to other people about it?
That was the way I talked to other people about it for a long time. Yeah.
So it was kind of a coping mechanism in a way.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And nobody can be 100% sure all the time about everything. You know what I mean? I could be wrong. I know for a fact that I was awake when those two guys, things, whatever you want to call them, were in my room. Yeah. No question about that.
Well, memory is a funny thing. We'll keep going with the story, but I can say that I know that there are memories that I have from back when that are blurrier now.
Yeah.
Like those same memories, if I recall them 10 years ago, would be clear, would be fresher. In your case, however, I think you've had kind of the advantage of telling your story over. The same thing with like Travis Walton, right? He's told his story over and over again, so it kind of keeps it fresh in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
But we do know that memory can be slippery.
Oh, I know, absolutely. Yeah. But also, I found, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but certain events in my life that really triggered strong emotional things to me, like the June 30, 83 incident, like the incident with them in my bedroom, like the incident with my friends, like when I watched the Challenger explode. I know exactly where I was, what I was doing.
Right.
When I heard that John Lennon was shot and
Mhm.
died,
Mhm.
and even for me, when I heard Judy Garland died, even though I was a little kid, I was
Yeah, yeah.
obsessed with her and I loved her. And when I heard on the radio that she'd passed away, I remember going out and to the backyard and I was on my swing set and
Yeah.
I could hear the song Over the Rainbow in my head and I was just sobbing. So things that really imprinted on me
Mhm.
at the time they happened emotionally have been the clearest.
Well,
And
this is used by the skeptics against, experiencers too, is that memory isn't so reliable. But I think the confusion becomes certain details might slightly change over time, right? Or you might forget or
well,
re-remember something that you had forgotten. But like I remember when 9/11 happened exactly where I was.
mhm,
I mean, I would bet everything on the fact that I know exactly where I was, the
mhm,
car that I was in, but all like maybe the minor details around that. No, I don't remember all that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're not wrong, and I don't have a problem with skeptics. It's
Hmm.
debunkers that are on some other level that I don't understand why
Hmm.
they do what they do. But I think it's healthy to be skeptic, and I I'm the first one that's going to try and figure out the rational explanation for whatever I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Like I've said it in the past and I'll continue to say it. As far as some of my memories go, I'm 65 years old.
Hmm.
I remember the impactful stuff that really caused me the most emotion,
Hmm.
but the extra, just like you said, some of the other stuff gets fuzzy after,
Yeah.
50 years. So,
I think you made a good point. Anytime we experience something of heightened emotion,
mhm,
that's the stuff that really sticks.
right.
Yeah. So after you've had this experience, now you're married.
Mhm.
You're seeing possibly something looking through the window in the house next door. That's fun.
Yeah.
Then where did your contact experience go from there?
Um, I think the biggest next thing, well, probably would be June 30, 83 at that point. Because we're talking about 79 or 80 then
Mhm.
in that time. And then June 30, 83 was like the massive thing. And it was the one thing that I couldn't figure out. It was, I couldn't figure out what made the mark in the yard. The big thing about the June 30th, 1983 incident too is there were other witnesses
Mhm.
besides my mom who saw the basketball sized ball of light. There was the damage done to the yard that was there for a couple of years. Um,
Did the damage occur at the same time as
uh-huh.
and what was the damage from a UFO or
Well, I don't know what it was that
okay.
was back there that night. There was something back there. It wasn't that big. It was
I have
egg-shaped.
some oh, I'm sorry, Deborah. I have some old photos that you sent me in a previous episode.
Uh-huh.
Is this
Yeah, that's the mark in the yard. That's part of the mark in the yard. There was a 49-foot streak that came off of this circle. There was about a that it that's kind of it's hard to tell because that's the year the snow melted off of it, the
okay.
first year.
Yeah.
That's like the first summer after where the grass started to grow in. The circle was about 8 foot in diameter. And then it had this 49-foot streak that came off of one side of it that went
That's
all the way
bizarre.
across the whole backyard
Yeah.
and ended up by the driveway in a perfect arc. And all the grass kind of laid down within this circle and turned this weird grayish brown. And
Mhm.
the soil in the center, the soil under all of that mark was like a rock hard. Um, and it kind of smelled a little weird. And when we first saw it, and I began to remember things from the night that I got hit in the chest with the light and saw that thing out there in the same place.
Mhm.
I called the agricultural agent of the state of Indiana at Purdue University, asking them about soil and what could cause to do things, that what could maybe cause them to do something like this. I got soil samples that I sent to Budd And I also kept some for myself, which I still have. And I had started having memories. Okay, I'll get back so I don't confuse everybody. It was June 30th, 1983. I was living with my parents. I had my 2 little kids, getting divorced, and I was getting ready to go cut patterns with a friend of mine who lived a street behind mom and dad. And while I was getting ready to leave, I noticed this weird light in the pump house of the swimming pool. And I pointed it out to my mom. And she's like, don't worry about it. Your dad can get it when he gets home. Dad was working second shift at Ford at the time. So 5 minutes later, I'm in my car and I'm still thinking about this weird light. So I went ahead and drove down the side of the house into the turnaround behind the swimming pool just to make sure there weren't any prowlers walking, messing around out there. Aliens. I wasn't thinking about aliens or UFOs at all. And I didn't see anything, but I noticed the garage door was now open. That was the garage attached to the house. I would notice the pedestrian door in the back was open. Well, it only took me a minute to get to my friend's house. As soon as I got there, I called mom and I said, hey, the pedestrian door, the garage is open. Yeah. And she's like, don't worry about it. Your dad will get it. He can take care of that when he gets home too. So I hang up the phone and then it rings and she calls back immediately and says, I want you to come home right now. And I'm like, what is going on? Why? And my girlfriend and her husband were hearing the conversation and he made the comment, tell her to call the police. That's what they get paid for. And she heard him and she said, no, I want you home. I want you here. I don't want anyone else here. I'm like, okay. So I said, I'll be right back. So I got my car and I went home. This time I pulled up along that side drive and got out, went in the Florida room and mom was in there. There was a shotgun next to the trash compactor that I picked up and mom comments to me that, that's not loaded, right? And I'm like, yeah, I know it, but whoever's out there don't. So I took the gun and I went out walking around back there, went to the pump house, couldn't see anything, didn't see anything in the yard, went checking the workshop behind the pool because there's a lot of Indian motorcycles and little British race cars that my dad was Alpine Sunbeams that my dad was restoring back there. So there's a lot of money back there, so I'm making sure everything is secure.
Sure. Yeah.
And I found the dog that should have been in the garage under the dad's ladder truck, but she wouldn't come out. I went back across the yard and into the garage, figuring, if anybody's here, this is where they got to be hiding. So I flipped the light on and I went in there. And I probably wasn't in there a minute or so. And all of a sudden I felt like I was on fire. I started feeling hot all over. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, I got to get out of here now. And I headed to the pedestrian door. And as soon as I got to the door, something hit me and stopped me in the doorway. It was like a intense white light hit me like in the chest. And I could feel this shaking and vibrating and this light kind of go through me gradually till it like enveloped my entire body, And I know my eyes were closed, but I couldn't get away from the light. I couldn't move. And the shaking turned into a vibrating. And then it was to the point where it felt like I could almost feel every molecule of my body, vibrating independently. And I don't know how long I was in that condition. But when the shaking stopped and the intensity of the light backed off, I became aware of the fact that I wasn't in the doorway anymore. I was actually standing in the middle of the cement patio out in front of the doorway, the lower patio. And that's when I realized I couldn't still move, but I could see movement in front of me. And I saw what I thought were small. I think I remember reading an old text, text of one of the hypnosis sessions where we were trying to remember more stuff from that night. And I remember reading, saying they looked like they were bullet shaped. And by that, I meant they were like, bigger at the top and then down narrow. And then I thought, they're little kids. Why are these little kids in my parents' backyard?
Mm.
And as I watched them, they started all kind of come together and slide down forward in front of me, towards me, but not like right at me. And I was still watching them with my eyes. And then that's when I noticed to my left this thing that was not very much bigger than the pump house of the swimming pool. It was egg shaped, and it was like on its bigger bottom, and then the point at the top, that kind of egg shape.
Mm-hmm.
And some skinny things coming out of the middle of it that went down to the ground. And I don't even remember seeing where the little guys went. I don't know if they went in that thing. I don't even remember where they went. I then noticed a ball of light, probably basketball size, next to it out in front of me. And it went down really slow, and then it came back up really slow and stopped where it started. And at some point, I remember feeling somebody pulled down on my shoulder, grabbed my arm, and I felt this burning, stabbing, pinching sensation in my ear. And I couldn't move. I couldn't get away from it. I couldn't even scream. And then I heard a voice from somewhere. I didn't see anyone. I heard someone say it was unfortunate that I felt pain. And then later on, I remember thinking in my head, oh my God, my kids are in this house. And as soon as I thought that, the voice came back and said, your kids are fine. Your children are fine. Like, and then I calmed down.
Wow.
And this thing is still here. I don't know what it is. In retrospect, we called it a UFO, right? For years and years. And when Budd talked about it and everything, craft. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know if it was UFO. I can't imagine in my mind. It doesn't make logical sense that 6 of anybody would get in that thing and fly across the galaxy. So I'm not sure what it was. And I'm not sure if I was even in it at some point, because I don't even remember getting out the door. And to this day, I've never remembered anything else other than what, I've just described to you. Now, I heard my name being called, which was a different voice. And when I heard that, I was able to move, and I turned, and it was like everything that I was looking at just went away. It's like it was gone. And I started walking up to the steps, and my mother was standing at the top in front of the kitchen door. It's like she had the door kind of part open, was hollering at me, is everything okay? And I remember saying everything's cool. But I didn't want to go back and cut out patterns anymore. So I don't know. I felt weird and creepy, and I couldn't figure out, something just happened, but I can't figure out what it is. And I contacted my friend, and I don't remember whether I went back over there and then the 3 of us came back together, but then or if she just came back over with her daughter. But she brought her teenage daughter with her, and we decided to go swimming. It was nighttime in the pool. We had lights out there and everything at this point.
While you were still feeling this way?
Yeah. I was still feeling weird. I'm thinking, I want to get wet. I think swimming will feel good,
Okay.
So we're walking across the backyard towards the swimming pool at this point, and her daughter steps on something in the yard, and we thought maybe she'd stepped on a bee. But she's like, oh, my foot, And then she said her foot was tingling, and then she said her foot was going numb, and then she said her foot was going numb up her leg. And we got to the pool, and her mom looked her over. We didn't see anything on her foot. But we decided to go ahead and get in the swimming pool, because we figured if it was the bee sting, the cool chlorinated water would feel good and help it feel better, And we got in the pool, and we weren't in there very long, and all 3 of us started getting nauseous, feeling real sick to our stomachs. And my eyes started burning real bad. And I started seeing white halos around the outside lights. And I thought, oh, my eyes are killing me. So I think at one point my friend might have commented something like, hey, maybe if we go to White Castle and get something to eat, we'll feel better. I don't know if anybody knows what White Castle is, but generally speaking, if your stomach doesn't feel good, probably not a good choice.
It's like the antithesis.
Right. But I don't know that we went. I can't remember whether we went or not. I don't think we did.
But those little burgers, man, they used to be addictive. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're pretty good, but they don't like me much no more.
Mm.
But so anyway, they went home and I went to bed. But when I got up the next morning, my eyes were swelled shut. And I
Mhm.
was in so much agony that my mom took me to the hospital emergency room. And why this doctor was in the emergency room, I don't know, because I don't think typically ophthalmologists hang around in ERs, but
Mhm.
there was one in there. And they got him in to see me, and he asked my mom to take me across the street to his office so he could look at me better, because he had better equipment, more equipment there.
Right.
And so she did. And I remember him asking me, did I look into the arc of a welder's torch? And I thought to myself, why would you ask me something like that? That's
Yeah.
crazy. No, I didn't remember the intense white light at that point. That memory didn't come back until about a day or two later.
Mm.
So I mean, he gave me medicine, eye drops, and thick creams, and it
Mhm.
took weeks for my eyes to heal, and they were never right. My vision went real farsighted after that. I never wore glasses till after that night.
Mm. Is that a typical effect of high exposure to intense light?
I have no idea. I
Mm.
don't know, and and I'll tell you also, I was diagnosed with macular degeneration and cataracts in my late 30s and early 40s for those two. And I'm followed, I got me on the ARADs immediately, and I dilated every 6 months. And I've already lost my lenses and had, um, right when I was 50, they had to replace my lenses. So my eyes were kind of really, I blame that night and the light, but I can't prove it. So it's just,
Yeah.
it is what it is. But so the next day, it's getting to be 4th of July weekend holiday, and everyone comes to mom's house, mom and dad's house, because we have the pool. So we have the barbecue, and we play games and go swimming, light off cheap fireworks, annoy the neighbors. But the kids all go running out to the swimming pool, and the oldest boy comes back in and says, "Grandma, what's wrong with your yard?" So we went out there, and all the adults went out there and looked, and there was that mark, that big 8-foot circle and that long streak.
Mhm.
And my mom says, "Well, that's where our UFO landed the other night." And and it struck me like a slap in the face. And I remember looking at my mom and thinking, why in the hell would you say it? And she's kind of nervous, giggling and stuff like that. And then when I looked back at that mark again, it was like, oh my God. Oh my God. Then from that point on, so many memories started to flood back.
Mhm.
I remembered the light. Uh, I remembered other things too from my past that I hadn't even thought about for a long time, like when I was a kid, when I was first married, and those guys over the following
Yeah.
days and weeks, all these memories started coming back, and I literally felt like I was having a nervous breakdown.
Sure.
It was awful.
Well, it's amazing how one thing can trigger the unlocking of memories.
And it did. It was horrible, and I developed this phobia of the bathroom, which it started even before it started like right away. But
Mhm.
the bathroom upstairs, there's a small window up there, and that window overlooks exactly where the mark in the yard is, down in the yard. And I couldn't go in that bathroom and use the restroom at night because I kept thinking something was going to pull me out the window.
Hmm.
Now I could do it during the day just fine. And I started where I couldn't sleep at night. And I would sit up all night long in my kids' room between their twin beds, like I was waiting for something. And it wasn't until my mom would get up and the sun would come up, and then I could sleep. And I was just a disaster. I honestly feel like I may have had a little bit of a nervous breakdown at that point. I don't know. But I managed to get through it. Um, I had picked up a book called Missing Time in the library a few months before, and
Mhm.
I tried to read this book, and I hadn't had much exposure to that kind of stuff. I'd seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 77, I think, when it came out. Dad took
Mhm.
us to the movies on Christmas. I'd heard of the Barney and Betty Hill thing. I think I saw it on TV
Mhm.
with James Earl Jones played Barney or something like that. But I hadn't had a lot of exposure to. I was aware of the UFOs and stuff,
Yeah.
you know, and that I picked up in Missing Time, and I started trying to read it, and it creeped me out so bad that every time I try to read it, I have a panic attack. So I finally took it back to the library, but not before I had realized there was a place in the back where you could write to the guy who had written the book, right? So I went back to the library just to get the address. And I came back and I wrote like this huge letter and took some pictures of the yard because I was starting to feel the connection between that light and those kids and that thing in the yard and UFO stuff somehow. But when I wrote the letter originally, the letter I sent to him, I started out with my sister's experience because she said she actually saw a flying disc and her car got picked up and all that stuff. So I told him about that first. And then, oh, by the way, this happened, a few weeks ago. And I'm sure he opened up the letter and all these Polaroids fall out of this mark, and my sister was mad as hell at me for a long time because I even mentioned it. She got over it.
For sharing her experience?
Yeah, she was mad. She's like, I don't tell anybody about that. It's too late now.
Now it's going to be published. Yeah.
Well, the investigation took several years. And when he decided he really wanted to write a book about it, he came to us as a family. It wasn't up to me. Right. It was an entire family thing, and he proposed it. He's like, I think you guys have a very important story. You've got more than just witnesses of lights in the sky or strange little beings. You've got the marks in the yard. You've got the medical problems. You have all these other witnesses, things. Yeah. Even with this other stuff that you had happen to you through life, you've got witnesses that were with you. So it's not like it was just me only having weird stuff, But anyway, he's like, I really think it's an important case and I want to tell the world about it. And my family was like, I don't think so. And I was with them. No, that wasn't why, I just wanted someone to help me be normal, have a normal life, or tell me I'm crazy or tell me I'm not crazy. One of the two. But eventually he won. And as we agreed, as long as we had pseudonyms to protect us. We already had people coming to the house, taking pictures of the backyard and stuff. And the book wasn't even written yet. It was just how
did they know?
I don't know. I guess it was how it spread through the UFO community. When Budd would go and talk or whatever. But yeah, we had one time a neighbor called us and said, hey, did you know that there was a guy in your backyard in a suit? With a briefcase taking stuff out of that mark that's in your yard. And we're like, no, we didn't authorize anybody to do that. And
well, there certainly have been unscrupulous ufologists.
Oh, yeah, I know that now. Right? Yeah, we didn't know anything about any of that community back then. MUFON didn't even want to have anything to do with us when Budd first contacted them, saying, hey, we got this case that happened in your state, and because I had seen entities, they didn't want to have anything to do with me. Of course, now that's changed, fortunately, but back then, I think we ended up talking to Dr. Hynek at the Center for UFO Studies, because in early of 84, Mom and I had another sighting of this huge triangular shaped thing like that, or chevron or triangular shaped thing that passed right over the house. And we actually had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Hynek when we called the hotline. They used to have a 24-hour hotline. So
yeah, before you had the internet, we can just jump on there. Right.
Yeah. All this was way before internet, cell phones. The investigation was done with snail mail, very well-timed, expensive long-distance phone calls, and a few bus trips,
Well, yeah, and that meant there was a certain level of dedication and seriousness, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think with communication like that, well, one, you probably did lose a lot of reports and dialogue between experiencers and researchers, but at the same time, you probably filtered out a lot of false prank reporting.
Yeah, probably.
Did you ever talk to Travis Walton about the sensation he felt when the beam of light hit him and
I've
compared it
ta-
to your own?
I've talked to him. Yeah, I've talked to him several times over the years.
Mhm.
Um, I never really asked him. He thought his was similar to me. I remember him just being hit by it. I guess it knocked him off his feet and back several
Yeah.
feet. I
Well,
never
and when
asked
he
him.
woke up on the craft later, he was he was aching. He was in pain, his body.
Mhm.
Yeah. But you didn't feel like a pain or ache afterwards?
Not in my body, just my eyes.
Your eyes, yeah.
My body didn't feel that way. It just I felt gross. I remember when I was conscious, I remember feeling I just feel icky, like I want to get wet. Like I just felt like I don't know, like you know how
You
when
wanna
you
get
work out and then you just want to have a
yeah,
shower because you don't feel clean. I just didn't feel clean.
right. Well, and I wonder also if you were kinda statically charged and just needed to get into the water and discharge some of
I
that
don't know. I
energy
never
too.
thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had incidences after that, strange little things that would happen to me where I'd feel this s the way I described it was like a static electricity that just swirled all the way around my whole body, all the way around in my head, and it was just the weirdest sensation. But, that was just rando stuff that happened, weird stuff.
Well, I mean, am I wrong that allegedly people who once someone has been struck by lightning once, it increases the odds of being struck
I
again
and you know what?
statistically?
I don't know, I've heard that.
I've heard
I
that. I don't
think
know if
it
that's just
seems like I've heard that.
anecdotal. Yeah.
I know somebody I know 2 people. I just recently met a lady that's been struck by lightning 3 times, and then, of course, the dude that wrote I can't remember his name now. I met him many years ago. He wrote several books about it. He got struck by lightning, I think more than once, and, changed everything about him, his spirituality and everything.
Wow. Okay.
Can't remember his name now. It's a pretty famous dude.
So you had well, let me ask you this before we get to Philip class. Um,
Yeah, good old
so
Phil.
so growing up with the X-Files and then looking back at it in retrospect, one sees the way kind of Chris Carter used Dana Scully and her female body as a as a as a writing tool, as a as a way to tell story. And she was impregnated like multiple times and that sort of thing. Do you feel that was kind of I don't want to say the word not I don't want to say the word, but do you think it was a misuse of that kind of storytelling to use the abduction and phenomena and being pregnant and the hybrid thing over and over again? Do you think it was insensitive in any way to women who did report?
Well, uh, I could never figure out in the first place why I even mentioned it to Bud, because
Mhm.
it was just that one time in my life, and we never talked about it after it was over. And I last remember my doctor telling me, and I was a kid, teenager, my mom was in there with me, and he says, "We see these things from time to time." And my mom was like, does she need to have a D&C? And he's like, "No, everything looks fine." He goes, My best advice to you would be to forget this ever happened. You're young and you're going to have other children, and because everything is fine."
Mhm.
And I remember leaving his office thinking, I'm never going to forget this. And I never did.
Of
But
course.
we didn't talk about it until one of the memories. Remember, I told you when I saw the mark in the yard and memories started
Mhm.
flooding back, even from years past. One of the things that I started thinking about again out of the blue was that whole period of time in my life where I was pregnant and I wasn't. And the strange dreams that I'd had around that. And so I blurted it out to him one time when he was at our house. And then I was so mortified that I'd said anything. I started crying. I was embarrassed because I thought, oh my God, this guy's going to think I'm crazy, and especially the look on his face was like, oh, I could tell he was very sympathetic, but he was also kind of like, oh, okay, what does this have to do with me? He's like, what am I supposed to do with this? But by the end of it all, and he'd written the book, or he was writing the book. He got approval for us from the family to write the book. Then he came to me and he's like, I want to include this weird pregnancy. And I'm like, no, that's okay. No, I don't think so. I'm not comfortable with that. It's just too weird. And also, it hurts me when I still think about it because I was pregnant and then I wasn't. Mm-hmm. But again, he convinced me by showing me letters from other women who'd had similar experiences, and I'm like, damn, really? This actually, people have had this happen to them? Mm-hmm. I had no idea. We didn't hear about that sort of thing where I lived, and we didn't talk about it. And mm-hmm. It was a different time again. So I said, for better or for worse, well, I guess okay, and sometimes I regret that. Yeah. And sometimes I'm glad I did, when I meet women that have dealt with some of that. Now, I think Budd did okay by it. He told the story the right way. And then I was able to tell it, from my first person later. Mm-hmm. But some people may not think it was done right, or it is what it is. It's not going to get undone at this point. Mm-hmm. That toothpaste ain't going back in that tube. Nope. So, I just hope in my heart of hearts that it helps somebody.
Yeah, it's like a support group, a public support group.
Real public.
Real public. Yeah. How do you feel then about the reports of people having hybrid human alien children where supposedly they were pregnant, they were no longer pregnant, and they did discover on another encounter or abduction experience that they had a child?
Well, I remember I told you I'd had strange dreams surrounding that whole thing, and some of those were of seeing a little girl, older, but I've always called those dreams because I don't know what else to make of them. There's only one time I knew when I saw this child that wasn't a dream, is because I was sitting in my apartment having a cigarette, drinking a cup of coffee, when I saw this child peeking at me between the slats of my privacy fence. And I got up to chase after her when I realized something weird was about her. And this was years later when the baby that I lost would have been, older. Mm-hmm. And I was awake then, but I don't judge anybody. I mean, I can't judge anybody else. For God's, I'm the last person on earth that should be judging anybody's experience. And I can only speak for my own. Mm-hmm. So, they could be right about the things they say, or they could be wrong. I could be, wrong about some of the things that I've remembered, or things that I've called dreams that maybe weren't dreams, or things that I've, so I don't know. I don't know what to think about it all. I say at this point in my life, I guess anything is possible. If you can think and it can be somewhere, mm-hmm. It can happen somewhere.
It's funny you say that, because that's like the out, right? For like,
what else am I supposed to say?
I know. But that's, so from the skeptical point of view, it's like, well, you guys are just giving yourself an out. But I'm also saying, but what if? Why couldn't that be possible? Whether it's Bigfoot or ghosts or alien abduction experience. So
it's all in what you can choose. When I tell people my story, I always say, I'm going to tell you what I remember. Mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you what I think I know. Yep. I'm going to give you my opinion about things and my theories. And then you just take whatever it is that you can swallow. And then whatever the rest of it is, you do whatever you want with it. I'm not here to make you believe me. If you don't believe me, that's okay too. I'm good with that.
So before we go, can you share this encounter here with Philip Glass? Mm-hmm. Because what you just said reminded me of what you told me you told him.
he had written a book. This was at a conference back in the early 90s, I think we just determined, or late 80s, somewhere like that, in
Early
Florida,
90s.
I
We
think.
think 91 or 92 was a MUFON
Yeah. And
symposium. Yeah.
he was there. He was always at these things, lurking around. And he had written some really nasty stuff about my mom and me in one of his books, but really made me mad because he never talked to me. I'd never met him in my life. And the things he wrote were things that you'd have, you'd think you'd know someone and to write these things.
Right.
And when I found out he was going to be there, I started chasing him all over the place. For a couple of days, I tried to catch up with him. And it seemed like every time he caught me in the corner of his eye, he'd take off in the opposite direction. I finally cornered him, got him cornered. And I'm like, you know what, Mr. Class? I don't really know why you wrote all those bad things about my mom and me. You've never met us. You don't know anything about us. We're not bad people. And if you had questions about things, all you had to do is ask me. I would have been more than happy to answer your questions to the best of my ability. And if I didn't know, I would tell you I don't know. And,
what did he say to you like that, or like that really upset you? That was a kind of a debunking effort.
Well, you see him smiling,
Mm-hmm.
he kind of, smooth talked his way around it, apologetically, but never actually saying, I'm sorry. And
Yeah.
it actually made some comment about, my mother raised me well, apparently, because I didn't like walk up to him and slap him in the mouth or cuss him out or anything. I was just trying to be real,
It's still a little pedantic, but all right.
Uh, you know what? Then I woke up the next day and I went to leave my hotel room, and there was this little stack of books at the door. And they were every book that he had written that he'd brought with him because he was selling them. And he'd inscribed in these books, just little things like, it's nice to meet you. And I mean, nothing bad in any of these books. I would give anything to have them now. I think that they were part of what got destroyed in the tornado, but or they could have been in when my late husband died. I sold his massive UFO book collection, and they might have found their way in that. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, he never really said he was sorry. He never explained to me why he did what he did.
Yeah.
But he was never rude to my face. And after that, my name never crossed his lips again.
Well, that's
Not that
what
I'm
I was
aware of.
wondering. Yeah, those books were almost like an olive branch. He couldn't verbalize the "I'm sorry," but maybe that's what that was.
I have no idea, but yeah.
What was his striking point? Like, what did he think that was like the best, aha, I gotcha on this?
I don't think he really had one, as far as I know.
So he really just went after like,
He made his character assumptions about us that we were
mm,
liars and things like that. He didn't really have a striking point where he's like, haha, no. At least not that I'm aware of. Everything that I was made aware of was just, like, oh, she's a liar. They're just making up stuff. It's a hoax, blah, blah, blah. Like, you don't even know me, dude.
well, that's also a circular argument. It's just right. It's like, I know that they're liars, ergo you're liars, and that's all you need to know, right?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Well, he's passed.
Yeah, he knows the truth now, wherever he's at.
Yeah, but sadly though, he has passed on. I think probably intentionally. A lot of these debunking efforts and techniques, because a lot of people borrow from him now. They go back and look at his approaches and recycle it, use it.
Well, more power to him, I guess. I guess everybody got to do something in life, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm look, I'm glad that you are who you are, because the truth is there are some people, and just like there's the occasional unscrupulous ufologist, there are the not so honest experiencers who I feel sometimes really do start in a sincere place, but then they end up getting kind of caught in the attention field. And then I feel like they build on their story, they embellish, and then perhaps even lie, just to keep themselves relevant. And you certainly haven't done that. That's for sure.
Hell, there's been years where I hadn't even spoken about it at all. I've always had a life. My goal in life was to raise my kids,
Right.
have my
Yeah.
kids raised happy, healthy, have a good job, pay my way in the world, and that's what I did. So
Yeah. It's got to be a weird thing. It's almost like that kind of celebrity syndrome because people probably look at you and just all they see is a UFO fantasy, right? An alien story, but that's really just a small fraction of your life's experience.
yeah, and there are millions of people out there just like me.
Mm.
And for every person out there like me that's telling their story, there's probably 30, 40,000 that ain't ever going to say a word, but they're
Mhm.
there. So I could be
Yeah.
your next door neighbor. I could be you. Oh no.
Well, speaking of next door neighbor, really quick, I want to check with you. Am I correct? Did a neighbor see a UFO over your house? Did you tell me that at some point?
The lady next door that night saw a bright flash in the yard, and one of the other neighbors. Now, this wasn't that night, June 30, 83. The Bud went and talked to them,
Okay.
but they did tell him that before my parents had moved into that house, they had seen something over the house, but
Something.
like UFO.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly what kind of UFO, but they had said they'd seen a UFO over the house, but that was before my parents even moved in there. And then,
Right.
of course, we had the two neighbors. One to the north said she saw a bright flash from the backyard and the
Mhm.
house shook and her TV went red and all that weird stuff. So,
Yeah. See, well, there you go. That's multiple eyewitnesses. That
right.
is a form of corroboration.
And
Very
then the
clever.
lady
Yeah.
across the street was a night nurse when she hadn't been awakened yet,
Yeah.
but she was awakened before her alarm woke her up to the sound of what she thought was a jet crashing in her house. And the digital clocks in the front of the house were flashing and had to be reset.
Right. That's interesting you say that because there have been some reports where people have heard the sound of something like an airplane, but it wasn't,
Hmm.
clearly wasn't an airplane. That kind of
Right.
jet sound. That's not
Yeah.
uncommon. When you guys took the samples, did you find anything unusual in the ground samples?
Well, Bud, it's in Intruders, and I know the soil was unable to accept any kind of moisture,
Oh yes.
which would
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
why snow melted off of it that first year. You
Right.
know,
Right.
whenever we get a little snowfall, you can't say it was the grass that made it come off because
Mhm.
there's all various stages of grass and stuff under the snow in the yard everywhere, but it only came off in the shape of the mark in the yard. So, um, and I forgot what was I saying. What
Well,
did
that's
you
right.
ask?
We're gonna wrap it up now anyway. So
Oh
perfect
yeah.
timing.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Debbie, thank you so much. I'm so happy to have you on, really.
Oh, anytime. I love to talk to you.
Yeah, and so everyone, please check out your new book too, Extraordinary or Semi-New, Extraordinary Contact: Life Beyond Intruders. You can find that
Mhm.
on Amazon, and where else can they get it?
You can get it at book Barnes and Nobles,
Mhm.
on most major online booksellers. You can pick it up there.
Okay, cool. All right, well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Okay, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Really, really appreciate it. This podcast is rebroadcast on the UnX network every Thursday night at 11 p.m. Pacific time, 2 a.m. Eastern time, Friday mornings. And I want to special thank Margie K, Race Hobbs. They're awesome. Sometimes there are gaps in the series of this podcast, and they are so supportive and I really appreciate their continued support of the program, whether it's Mystic Lounge or Coffee and UFOs. There's always a place for us there at the UnX Network. So thank you to all of them. And thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. I appreciate it. Everyone in chat, hey, you guys rock. And if you want to follow this and get any updates on this podcast, go to @paranormal_now on X or on Instagram @paranormalnow. And on Facebook, it's Mystic Lounge. Until next time, peace and love, everyone, and keep your eyes to the skies and to the ground and in the ocean because you just never know. All right. I'll catch you guys next time.